When people talk about the most infamous women in history, one name often rises above the rest: Elizabeth Bathory. But who was she really? A ruthless killer? A political victim? Or a legend that grew darker with time? Today, we're exploring the historical facts, the accusations, and the myths, without glorifying violence and without turning tragedy into entertainment. Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful noble families in the Kingdom of Hungary. The Bathory family had princes, judges, and military leaders. She grew up in castles, surrounded by wealth and political influence. At just 15 years old, she married Count Ferenc Nadezhdy, a Hungarian war hero. While her husband fought in battles against the Ottoman Empire, Elizabeth managed vast estates and servants. By all accounts, she was educated, intelligent, and highly respected in noble circles. But after her husband's death in 1604, rumors began to spread. Between 1609 and 1610, reports surfaced that young servant girls working at her castle were disappearing. Villagers whispered about abuse, parents demanded answers, and eventually, King Matthias II of Hungary ordered an investigation. In 1610, officials raided her castle. According to testimonies collected at the time, investigators claimed to find abused and dying girls inside. Over 300 witnesses were reportedly questioned. Some claimed the number of victims reached into the dozens. Others exaggerated it into the hundreds. However, historians today debate these numbers heavily. It's important to note, Elizabeth Bathory was never given a public trial. Instead of being formally tried in court, she was placed under house arrest in her own castle in 1610. Her servants were tried, and several were executed, but Elizabeth herself remained confined in a sealed section of her castle until her death in 1614. Why no trial? Some historians believe the Hungarian crown was deeply in debt to the Bathory family. A public execution could have triggered political instability. Quiet confinement may have been the safer choice. Others argue that the evidence was overwhelming, and her noble status protected her from harsher punishment. The truth may lie somewhere in between. One of the most famous and horrifying legends claims that Elizabeth bathed in the blood of young girls to preserve her youth. However, historians agree that this story appeared decades after her death. There is no contemporary record from the original investigation that mentions blood bathing. This detail likely emerged later, influenced by folklore and Gothic storytelling traditions. It transformed a criminal case into a vampire-like myth. The Guinness World Records once listed her as the most prolific female serial killer, based on historical testimony. But modern scholars urge caution. Many witness statements were gathered under torture, which was common practice in the 17th century. Some accusations may have been politically motivated, and the exact number of victims remains uncertain. What we do know is this: real young women suffered and died during that period, and their lives should never be overshadowed by sensational legend. Today, historians are divided into three main views. 1. She was guilty of severe abuse and murder. 2. The crimes were exaggerated for political reasons. 3. The truth was distorted by both power struggles and later folklore. Unlike modern criminal investigations, 17th century justice lacked forensic science and transparency. That makes certainty impossible. Elizabeth Bathory's case blends power, fear, gender politics, and myth. She was a wealthy woman in a male-dominated aristocratic system. She controlled land and servants, and she became a symbol, either of cruelty or of conspiracy. Over time, her story inspired books, horror films, and Gothic fiction. But separating fact from fiction is essential. True crime should never glorify violence. It should teach us about justice, power, and the importance of evidence. Elizabeth Bathory remains one of history's most debated figures. Was she a monster hidden behind noble status, or a woman caught in political warfare? The historical record leaves room for interpretation, but not for romanticizing tragedy. Behind every accusation were real human lives, and that is what truly matters.